I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Katie, for coming on the Soulish podcast and for your time and sharing with us your tons of knowledge of human design. It's a whole new world. And so I'm just really excited to dive in and talk about types and strategy and just how that works together and how that helps us live our life, enjoy our life, and kind of navigate life by understanding just even that. And so I'm super excited for this conversation and to have you. It's such a privilege. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's always fun to meet fellow manifestors. There's lots of us, but there also aren't. So it's always cool to come across other ones.
Yes, we're like 9%. Yes.
Yeah, 9-10%, something like that. 8%, I don't know, somewhere around there. Who knows how accurate the statistics are, but that's generally what's said.
Yes, we'll stick with, I think on Jovian Archive it says 9. I was like, cool.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Awesome. I'm rare. It made me feel special.
I know. I hear that from generators sometimes where they're like, oh, I wanted to be special. And I'm like, you are. Like, just because your type is a majority, like everyone is so unique and different, Yeah.
And there's so much more that goes into it, which we can't get into this episode because there is so much with human design and all that. But I thought it'd be really cool as kind of like an intro into human design for those who are listening and watching and have never really heard about this, or maybe they've heard about it a little bit, but they haven't really dived in yet. I thought it'd be cool for us to just go through the types: manifestor, projector, reflector, and generator. And then there's kind of a hybrid manifesting generator, which is cool. Probably makes the generators out there feel special when they're a manifesting generator. But I think we could start maybe with manifestors, since that's mine. And just dive in and like share with us like what defines a manifestor.
Yeah, absolutely. So manifestors, like we said, they're about 10% of the population, 9, 8, whatever it is. And they are here to make some sort of an impact, essentially. And it's really interesting with manifestors because manifestors are here to initiate, and pretty much everyone is conditioned to be a manifestor except for manifestors. So I'd be interested to hear what your experience with this is like, Whitney, because I definitely resonate with not being conditioned to be a manifestor. So a lot of people are raised being like, just go out and do it and make it happen. You have to take action. And then manifestors are often raised being like, whoa, you can't just do that. Like, slow down. That's too much. Stop this, stop that. Be quiet, sit down, And it's like, sometimes we're like little hurricanes almost energetically, not energetically like all over the place, but we can just be sort of forceful. And so I feel like people pick up on that and they're like, whoa, like calm down, stop that. And often manifestors really end up kind of questioning their ability or their power. And something that often happens with them is they become massive people pleasers.
Yes.
And
You're telling me my life.
Mine too. Let me tell you, really. Are you an emotional manifestor? Do you know? Like, do you have the emotional authority? I should have looked at your chart.
I know. Dang. I could probably sneak it. Let me see if I saved it in the pictures, but I feel like I'm splenic, but that probably has nothing to do with that.
No, it does.
Oh, it does? Good,
yeah, that could be your authority. And so then you wouldn't be emotional if that's the case.
Okay. Yeah.
That would make sense.
I am emotional.
We all are.
But yes. No, I'm joking. I'm totally joking with you. Like, I am emotional, but
yeah. So with manifestors, like I said, they're really here to make some sort of an impact. And it's kind of annoying, I find, to hear that as a manifestor, especially when you're first new to human design, because manifestors are quite likely to be out of alignment just because, like I said, we have so much conditioning out of what our type naturally is. And so it's like, like, what is this impact? I don't know what this is about. And I remember when I first heard it and I was like, I don't know. Like, I had felt for so long, like, I don't know, when the universe was handing out like purpose when we were born or something, that I just got missed. And And I mean, I know that's not the case. We're all obviously designed to be here for a reason. But it was something where I didn't really resonate with that whole impact thing, or that whole like having power, being able to make things happen. And it took me a while of really working with human design before it clicked. And so all of the types, which when we talk about them, we'll talk about the strategy that goes along with each type, because those go hand in hand. And so with manifestors, they're here to inform. That's the strategy that they have, which I feel, again, is kind of like an empty strategy, because it's like, inform people of what? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? And what I really came to learn as a manifestor is that, yes, informing is part of your strategy, but you're really here to wait for the urge, because manifestors kind of get this like internal urge that comes through them to act. And again, with manifestors, when they're not really operating in their highest capacity, often they don't really get the urges, or they have like a lifetime of ignoring the urges, because sometimes they're really random. And it's like, why would I do this? Or maybe when you were a kid, you would act on those urges and then you would get in trouble because they're like, oh my gosh, why did you do this? Like, how come you didn't tell me that you were doing this or you were going there? And you were like, oh, okay. So you stop doing these things. Do you resonate with that?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I find with manifestors, it's this whole idea of like, you need to wait for the urge and then act on the urge. And then when you act, you need to inform people that are going to be impacted by your actions. So, sometimes no one's going to be impacted. Like I joke, I used to have this really random urge before I understood human design, to do headstands. And I know that's like the strangest thing, but I would have this urge, like literally for like 3 years, I had this urge to do a headstand and I would never do it, because I'm like, that's so random. Why would I do this? And that's just kind of it. It's like, you get random urges as a manifestor, but you tend to ignore them because it's like, oh, this is silly. Why would I do this thing? Right. But that's kind of part of the magic of a manifestor, is like, the more you are able to listen to those urges and to follow those urges, if they're correct for you according to your authority, which is another part of human design, you get more of them, and you get bigger ones that will lead you kind of in the right direction and on the right path. And so again, that's really what I look at as the manifestor strategy. Of course, in traditional human design, it's informing, but what you're informing about is the action you're taking based on the urge that you sort of received. Does that make sense?
Total. Yep. That's so cool. That makes me feel so validated.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, manifestors, another thing is that they're here to also be somewhat polarizing to a degree. And that is often difficult for people, right? Especially when we get conditioned to be people pleasers, because we're like, oh, I want everybody to like me. And like, I can't stand it when this person doesn't like me or doesn't think this or doesn't agree with me. But it's like, manifestors, first of all, nobody is here for everybody. There's not a single design that's here to be for everyone, right? We all have our people. And same thing with manifestors. Like, we have our people that are going to resonate with us, that are going to get us, that are going to be interested in us. And then there's going to be people that just aren't. And I share that a lot. When I first started doing human design, I got a serving job when I was first starting to like rebuild my business, or build my business rather. And I was working with a lot of people in the financial industry, and they would ask me like what else I did. And I would talk about human design, and their eyes would just kind of like glaze over, and they clearly had no interest. And I thought for a long time, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't the right thing, or maybe I'm not talking about this right. And it's like, no, they're just not my people. And so with manifestors, it's really important to remember that not everyone is going to get what you do. Not everyone is going to get your vision. You're kind of here to be that trailblazer, that leader, and to be like ahead of your, maybe not ahead of your time to a degree, but something like that, where you're here to do something first, to initiate something. And if everyone is understanding that and getting that, then you're probably not, doing the thing that's right for you. And so it's like, it's really normal to have people that just don't get it, where it's like, it doesn't make sense what you're doing or what you're up to, but that's okay. That probably is a good indication that you're on the right track.
That's so interesting. I never knew that or thought of it that way. I knew that it was, and I may be wrong, but when I've studied at least Manifestor, just to try to understand, like, how am I supposed to navigate life and business and all of that, this podcast. And I understood that it was to first be informed and then inform. So is that how it comes down, is like a download and then boom? Or is it like, it's based off of our authority, right? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Your authority is how you make the decision. So the urge kind of comes first. So perhaps I haven't heard it said that way, but maybe that's what they mean by be informed, that you're like, I don't know, informed internally or something like that. I haven't heard it said that way specifically, but that's an interesting way to put it. I usually talk about it as an urge or, yeah, like a download, something like that. And because I think the term urge people can understand generally, because it's like you get
Yeah.
that feeling, like you know what it's like when you're like really pulled to something, or you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing. It's different than just getting an idea. Because I mean, I have like, 100 ideas, but they're very different than when I get an urge where I'm like, ooh, okay, I got to do this, which I still often resist. Because sometimes the urges, like I said, they're like, oh, come on, really? This thing? That's weird. Or I don't know. Can I do that? Yeah. So the urge I find comes first, and then it's the informing piece. But like I said, a lot of how human design is taught, I find really focuses just on the informing, which to me is missing a big part of the picture for manifestors, because what are you supposed to be informing? What are you supposed to be doing? What is this, thing that you're supposed to be initiating? So that's how I like to talk about it, is with the urge first. And I probably have heard that from, I don't know, other teachers as well. I'm not claiming that to be my own knowledge. Maybe it is. I'm not sure at this point.
No, that's so cool. Thank you for breaking it down. I think when you were talking, I was thinking, like, is manifestors more like trailblazers, like people that are kind of making a way where there wasn't before in some field or something? Is that kind of what you would also describe a manifestor as?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the way that a lot of people talk about manifestors, and I don't think that that's incorrect. I don't often really focus on that aspect of it, but yeah, but being like a trailblazer or being at the forefront of something, I like to focus more around the following of the urge, because I think, at least for me, when I hear this thing about like, oh, I'm supposed to be a trailblazer, I'm supposed to be at the forefront of something, then in my head, I like get into my head about it. And it's like, oh my gosh, what's this thing? And I'm supposed to like, how do I figure this out? And how do I do this? And it's like, no, it's not about that. Just like follow the urges, and the urges will naturally lead you there. And I mean, one example in my own life, several years ago, I hired this business coach. Gosh, I don't know how many years ago this was now, 7 years ago, probably more than that. Anyways, whatever. I hired this business coach, and I really wanted to create a business around self-love and coaching around that. And now in 2021, as we're filming this, self-love is everywhere. Everyone's talking about it, everyone's all over it, and it had such a big impact in my life. But at that time, not really a lot of people were talking about it. Like, there weren't books, there weren't podcasts, people weren't talking about it on Instagram. It was nowhere. I mean, it probably was somewhere, but it wasn't popular, it wasn't cool, it wasn't anything. And I remember telling this coach that's what I wanted to do, and she's like, that doesn't really sound cool. Like, I don't think you should do that. And I was like really
Crushed.
devastated. Yeah, I was so crushed, because it was so transformational for me. And I look at that now, and it's just like, that's such a typical manifestor thing to happen, where it's like, had I gone through that and done that and known my strategy and authority, and like known to follow my urge, and to be like, okay, well, whatever, she just doesn't see it yet, she will, that's fine, I'm not going to let her stop me. But I did, because it's like, I didn't know this stuff, and she was the coach that I hired, so I just assumed that she knew better than I did, right?
Yep. Oh, that's so good. I wonder how many people are listening to this and going, damn it.
Well, and what's so interesting as well, which I know we're not really going to dive into, but in looking at the gates and the planets in my chart, self-love is one of the most challenging parts of my design. So it's like, yeah, I was here to have a lot of challenges, overcome that, and then essentially help people with it, right? And so it's so fascinating to me as well that, like, no, that was there. If I knew human design, I would have been like, okay, well, too bad that you don't think it's cool, I'm gonna go and do it anyways.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's really fascinating to see human design that way.
I'm sure you like weave that in somewhere between
Oh
helping
yeah.
people and all of that. So it's like cool, because you still get to it all
Yeah.
led you to this point.
And that's one of my biggest, I don't know, reasons really for loving human design as much as I do, because I think when you understand how you're designed, you have so much more love for yourself. as well as other
Mhm.
people. You have so much more compassion because instead of being like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, again, when I was trying to start a business, the people that I worked with were all manifesting generators, which we'll get to later. And I was trying to be like them. And I was so burnt out and so exhausted and thought that, gosh, like what's wrong with me? How come I can't keep up with them? I'm never going to be successful. When really it's like, no, I'm just meant to be successful in a different way. Right.
Mhm.
And so I find
Mhm.
that, yeah, human design is like my favorite self-love tool because it's just seeing everything laid out. And it's just like, okay, cool. Yeah, this makes so much sense.
That's so cool. Ah, so it's more for manifestors, if I understand the breakdown, is that they basically need to follow the urge. And obviously, authority comes into that as far as how they follow that or how
Mhm.
they respond. Um, but that's basically the strategy for manifestors, um, and how they can maybe navigate career choices or love life. I was thinking to ask you, do you think most manifestors have like a specific career type, like mostly entrepreneurs like yourself and me? Or you think most
Yeah,
entrepreneurs are manifestors?
I don't think most entrepreneurs are manifestors just because there's not that many manifestors. I mean, there are and there aren't. But I think manifestors make good entrepreneurs when they're in alignment. And they're generally on the opposite, not the happiest of employees, especially in
Hmm.
traditional settings, because it's like
Yep.
they don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be controlled. They don't want anyone being like, you need to be here at this time, you need to do this at this time, unless, like I said, they're really shut down and they're really operating like they're not a manifester. Because I was like that
Mm,
for a while, where it's like, I just want someone to tell me what to do. I don't want to think, I don't want to do anything, because it just, you get worn down
yeah.
when you don't understand how you're operating. So manifestors that are really in their power, I think can be, I think everyone can be a great entrepreneur. But I think manifestors often do well in those roles because they're not always the best employee. Speaking from experience.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that because I've definitely felt that conflict on the inside
Mhm.
of like, but I'm not feeling that. And I think when I read about manifestors, it seemed like they need the space, or we need the space as manifestors to be able to flow and to be able
Mhm.
to take the time to discover, to follow the urges. And if we feel like we're confined and constrained and on a strict schedule with no free time, then that can really make us feel burdened, stagnant, stuck. We can
Oh
feel all those
yeah.
feelings.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I always say to manifestors, if they're not connecting to those urges and they're not getting those coming through, is that they're probably too busy. They probably don't have enough free time. They probably don't have enough play time or enough rest. And manifestors really work in these cycles of like booming energy. And then it's like they're dead. They need to just like take some time and totally recover. And I'm very much like that in my business, where it's like I'll have periods of like really exerting a lot, and then it's like weeks of like literally doing the bare minimum. And that doesn't work when you're in a corporate job. It's
No,
like
yeah.
the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Okay, you're done this, great, I have something else for you.
Hmm.
And it's just like relentless. And so it really is helpful for manifestors to have a flexible work environment anyways, when
Yeah.
they can really have those periods to rest and recover after they've had those
Yeah.
like big periods of output. Mhm.
Yep. Oh, that's so validating. Because I've always felt like, man, I'm so lazy. But it's like, no, I've like been going nonstop with working full time, with doing the business and all that. So it's
Yeah.
like, good. Okay. So, and I think too, on the flip side of that, you don't need tons of free time. It's just having that balance, right? Is the key.
Yeah, and I mean that'll depend on other things in your chart as well, depending on,
Mm.
if you like what other motors you have defined, which again, we don't need to get into right now, but it depends on other aspects of how your sort of energy works, and different people will operate differently. And I mean, human design is not the only factor. Like, are you hydrated? Are you eating food that's fueling you properly? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting enough sleep? Like, human design is
Yep.
one part of the puzzle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We are. whole beings.
Yes. Yeah. I always like to say with human design that like the map is not the land, right? Same with the body
Mhm.
graph. The body graph is not the human. Like there's a difference between them. So
Yeah.
it's important that, I think human design is incredible and it tells us so much, and it's not every single thing. There's
Yeah.
the sort of nature versus nurture aspect, of course.
That's so cool. Oh, so good. So my brother is actually a projector, and so is his
Cool.
girlfriend,
Oh,
funny enough.
fun.
So let's talk about projectors.
Yeah, my entire family that I grew up with are projectors, like my dad and my mom and my brother. And about 80 to 90% of my clients are probably projectors, which
Wow.
is surprising because projectors are only about 20% of the population.
Wow.
So considering they're, not one of the most common types, that's very bizarre that they're the most common ones of my clients for sure. For my students, it's different. I have like a pretty wide variety for students in the program that I teach, but yeah, for like one-on-one clients, they're almost all projectors. So that being said, projectors are really here to have sort of a unique perspective. They have this kind of wisdom. They're here to manage the energy, to guide others. So they're really like the managers of people, of energy, right? They're not really here to be the ones doing the work necessarily. And they usually have a
Mm.
unique way of seeing things. They usually have like unique perspectives on things because they can really see people. So one thing we didn't talk about with manifestors is the aura of a manifestor is often said to be kind of like dense and repelling. So I jokingly call it resting bitch aura. Because it's kind of like people can't really get into us. And I don't know about you, but like I'm not the most receptive to other people's energy sometimes. Like I'll, come into a room and be like, blah, 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 whatever. And then like after 5 minutes, I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's up with you? It takes me a bit to catch on because like manifestors are kind of in their own world. And so projectors are very different from that because projectors have an energy that's really penetrating and really gets into people. So they really know people. It doesn't get into manifestors, mind you, but to everybody else. And so, they usually have a unique way of looking at things. And I love some of my
Mm.
human design projector friends because it's like, oh, wow, you have a really interesting perspective on this. Like, I wouldn't have thought about it that way.
Mhm.
Right. And then going back to the self-love aspect of human design, again, that's why I love it because I don't need to beat myself up for not having these fantastic, unique perspectives. It's like, that's what projectors are here for.
Yep.
They're going to have that. I'm going to operate differently. Um, so that being said, projectors, they have a really unique kind of quality of energy, and they're what human design often calls as non-energy beings. I don't really like that term because I feel like
Yeah.
it's kind of disempowering. However, they don't have the sacral center, which is this sort of sustainable energy. Either do manifestors, mind you. Um,
Oh.
yeah, and so the only the generator types have the sacral. So that's anyway, we'll get
Mm.
into generators when we get there. But projectors, they're really magnetic people. They're really here to like draw everything into them. And so the strategy for a projector is to wait for the invitation. And I
Mhm.
find a lot of times with projectors, they either go one of two ways with that. They have like a massive like sigh of relief because they're so tired of trying to like go out and make things happen, or they're like, what are you talking about? I can't just wait for an invitation. Like nothing's ever going to happen. So often projectors are conditioned to work really hard, even though they're not meant to, because they have this kind of like inherent sense of kind of similar to what you said about like being
Mhm.
lazy. That's that whole non-sacral thing. We're not here to work when you have the sacral undefined, which projectors, reflectors, and manifestors do. So projectors often have this like fear of being lazy or have been called lazy at some point in their life because they're meant to have a lot of rest and they're meant to use their energy
Mm.
differently than most people.
Ooh, that's good.
So
I'm gonna let my
they,
bro know.
yeah,
You need to rest more.
it's so true. It's so true. And so with projectors, they often overcompensate for that because they have this like fear of being lazy and they don't want other people to think that
Mm.
they're lazy. And so then they do the opposite and they work themselves to the bone and they get super burnt out. almost every projector I've done a reading for has had a burnout experience by the time they're like 30, 35. And it's usually like a significant experience in their life. It's not just like, oh yeah, I was kind of burnt out, whatever. It was like, no, I was so burnt out, I had to take like 3 months off work kind of thing. And I mean, not all of them are that significant, but a lot are. And so it's really understanding for a projector that like, you're not here to be working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. You know, you're here to be working a few hours a day and then taking really good care of yourself. And so I often like to talk about projectors as if they're like Lamborghinis or something. I lived in Dubai for a little bit, and people had very fancy cars there that they would take out for like a little drive around the marina, you know, show off their Bentley, their Lamborghini, their Rolls Royce, whatever. And clearly I'm a car fanatic. I really don't care. But I talk about projectors like Lamborghinis because it's like, you wouldn't drive from like California to New York City towing a massive trailer behind a Lamborghini, right?
Yeah,
like
no.
you're not going to do that. You're going to take it out. You're going to show it off. It's going to be super magnetic. Everyone's going to be like, ooh, oh my gosh, look at that. This is awesome. Right. And then they're going to take the Lamborghini home and put their little car blanket on it and like lay it in bed.
Yep. First dust it off.
Exactly, right? Make sure it's really well taken care of. And that's really like, I think such a great analogy for projectors because they're really here to be recognized. They're here to be seen. They're here to be valued. And they're not here to be valued for their hard work, right? So it's doing what is exciting for them, doing what feels really good for them, allowing them to have space to dive into that unique area of interest where they can really be seen and they can really be valued. And then when they do that, the invitations come. I promise they do. I would not have believed this. I mean, I did not buy into this when I first really got into human design, because I was like, yeah, okay, as if you're just going to get invitations. But the more I work with it and the more clients, like I said, I have so many projector clients, they do. And they message me all the time being like, oh my gosh, you would not believe I got this invitation. It's so cool. And so it's really just like trusting that you are magnetic and that when you're lit up, people will see that and they'll recognize that in you and invite you into really amazing opportunities.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so useful, because I'm sure there's a lot of projectors out there that are feeling so burnt out or just used, or like, I'm working so hard, but this feels unnatural, like not how I'm supposed to be. And so that's
they're
really
often very bitter. So in human design, they have something called the not self, and that's usually just an indication of when you're out of alignment. And so with projectors, it's bitterness. And that's often an experience they have because they're trying so hard to be seen. They're working so hard to get recognized. And it's like, no one is doing that. And they are never going to be recognized for their hard work. I mean, not never, but that's really not what they're designed to be recognized for. They have so much more to offer than hard work. And so, yeah, really understanding that and giving them the time and the space that they need to just like be magnetic and do the things that they're here to do is really powerful.
Ooh, that's so good. That's so good. I know that's going to be very helpful for my projector friends, my brother. So that's really good.
Yeah. And if you have projector friends, recognize them because they want recognition. And so be really specific instead of just being like, oh, wow, you look great today. It's like, oh my gosh, I love how you did your hair like this and are wearing this thing. Or like if they do something really thoughtful, or like if they're really great at something specific, like be really specific and recognize them because that's going to feel amazing to projectors.
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. Thanks, Katie. I'm sure that'll help out a lot of relationships, friendships, family dynamics. Yes. So what about reflectors? Because they're very different, including their aura, right? Is really, really unique.
Yeah. So reflectors are the 1%. And that being said, you know, there's still millions of them around, but they're a lot less common, of course, than any of the other types. And they are very unique. So all of the other types are solar beings in the sense that we're related to the sun. Reflectors are lunar beings in the sense that they're tied to the moon. And so they operate very differently than all of us. If you look at a reflector chart, all of the shapes in the chart, which are centers, are going to be white. So sometimes people will pull it up and be like, this is a mistake. There's nothing here. And it's like, no, that's, perfect. It's how you're designed. But reflectors are They have an aura that is very much like a sampling aura. I kind of imagine the reflector aura as if they're like sort of like a shiny mirrored like UFO. Like you can't even see that they're there almost, but they can kind of like sample into like all these different areas and be like, ooh, what's this like? And what's this energy like? And what's this energy like? Because they really have a lot of openness that can help them to take in and sample all of the energy around them. And it's interesting because often people look at reflectors and think like, oh, they're so vulnerable because they have so much openness. They're not, because they have an aura that really protects them. So they're less vulnerable than like other types that have a lot of open centers. And not that, you know, everyone's perfect, everyone's designed wonderfully. There's no like better or worse, but there's this kind of like misconception about reflectors that like they're open and like, oh, that must be so hard. And it's like, well, no, their openness is different than all of our openness. So reflectors are really here to know others and to see others and to sample others. And it's often said that reflectors are the kind of the reflection of their community. So if they're around good people, if they're in a good place for them, they will be happy, they will be healthy. If they're struggling, then their community might not be the right one for them. You know, they might not be around the right people. And it's good for projectors to have a pretty powerful community around them, in a sense of they have people that they can talk to. Reflectors talk a lot, generally speaking. They're really here to like talk out all these different things. And they really need to have a community to talk things through, because for them, their where are my words? Their strategy is to wait for a lunar cycle. So where manifestors are here to inform and projectors are here to wait for the invitation, they're here to wait a lunar cycle. So they move a lot more slowly than the rest of us, especially when it comes to big decisions, which is tricky in the kind of Amazon Prime world we live in, where everyone wants everything immediately. Yeah, so reflectors are quite different, and they're so lovely to be around. They have so much wisdom and so much understanding of others, because they really can experience so much, but they also need time to be alone and to kind of like get out the energy of everybody else.
That's really good. So they really have to have that balance between being around people and having their alone time.
Yeah.
That would be like really important for them to remember or have in mind. Like you need to fill up. Not that they're maybe necessarily an introvert versus extrovert. They could be like 50-50, but it's more of like they do need that fill up time, alone time.
Yeah. And they need, because it's like they really do reflect the people that are around them, and the people that are around them will kind of flavor what the reflector is like. And so sometimes it's really helpful to just kind of like empty out, you know, get everybody else's energy out of your system and just kind of like come back to that clean slate so they can then like rediscover themselves. And that's one of these sort of challenges I find with reflectors, is that they'll feel sometimes like, I don't know who I am, or I'm constantly changing, or like, and people will sort of get frustrated because they'll think they're like flaky or something, or like all over the place. But it's like, that's the beauty. They're constantly changing. Like literally as the moon changes throughout human design, like 2 times, 3 times, sometimes a day, they change as well. And like, that's magic, right? But if people look at that and think that they're supposed to be consistent and they're supposed to be the same, that can be challenging, when it's like, they're just not designed to be that way. They're designed to be more like fluid and changing in a lot of areas of their life.
Wow. That's really cool. I know we're not getting into astrology, but that kind of makes me think, would they probably mostly be like a water sign, since they're kind of based around the lunar cycle? Would you say most
I don't
reflectors
think
are water
so.
signs?
I don't think so. Honestly, I haven't really looked into statistics
patterns.
around that. I mean, I'm thinking of the reflectors that I know. Some of them are, but yeah, I mean, I think reflectors are born, you know, all throughout the year and like all different signs.
Yeah.
It just, yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see that though. I wish I had
Like
the statistics.
how many of them are water signs? Because I'm a water sign. I have a lot of water in my chart.
Do you?
But I'm a manifestor, not reflector. But
Yeah.
But it's interesting just to kind of see like, because I bet you, if you're a water sign and you're a reflector, you would definitely flow a whole lot through like the lunar cycle and maybe feel it, since that's part of, right, like what the moon influences is the sea that we're surrounded by. So it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
we would
just
feel
looking.
things more.
I have a spreadsheet of my students, and I have, I think, like 5 or 6 reflectors in my course right now, which is a lot considering they're only 1% of the
Yeah.
population.
Yeah.
So I have a Capricorn, a Virgo, a Sagittarius. Oh shoot, I don't know what her sign is. I don't have her birth date written in my chart. I wonder if I have hers elsewhere. Anyways, so those are not, I don't know what a Sagittarius is. Is that a water sign?
No, I think that's fire, isn't it?
Is it? I think I'm not great with
I think it's a fire
astrology.
sign. That's okay.
And then another one I have is a Libra. So,
Okay.
and then a Pisces. So kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I like that. And that'd be something that would be really interesting to even look into, of like, based off of your maybe just even moon and rising sign, how that affects you or changes the dynamic for you as whatever type you are.
Oh, totally. And I
I'm sure
think
that
like,
really
yeah, there's definitely an impact there. And I imagine there's going to be some like heavy water sign reflectors that are just like super watery. But then there's going to be some that are like really fiery. And so I always think with the type in human design that it's so different than like a personality type. Like although there's
yeah.
characteristics, like you can be any kind of a manifestor, you can
Yeah.
be any kind of a reflector, and like they
Yeah.
can just show up so differently.
That's so cool. So much to unpack. But we will stick with this. Okay, so next up, generators. So
Yes.
I have a few generator friends, and Sarah James Carter is a generator, and she's constantly talking about like her strategy and how she's doing stuff. And I know that's really important, but I've heard of generators as kind of like the trees. They're the ones that are kind of like the life force, life source energetically for the world. And like, we need generators.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you have like your own business and a team, it'd be probably really beneficial for you to know like their types, because you definitely at least need one generator on your team, right? Because that would change things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never heard of generators being referred to as trees before, but yeah, I think that's so beautiful in the sense of like they're the life force. They really are. They're, the majority life force energy on our planet. That's where it comes from that sacral center, which if you're looking at your body graph, if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, you'll have like a red square second from the bottom. That's the sacral that I'm talking about. So the generator types, there's generators are about 70% of the population. And within that, there's pure generators, which are about 37%. And then there's manifesting generators, which is like a hybrid between generator and manifestor, although they're still predominantly generators because of the sacral center and their aura as well, which is a bit of a conversation in the human design community. There's a little bit of drama around this right now. Um,
Ooh.
but yeah, I mean, different people just have different ways of teaching things. And with the generators, whether you're a generator or a manifesting generator, you really are here to work in this lifetime. And I say that with a caveat being of like work that you love. And when I say work, I mean use your energy, right? You've been gifted with this amazing sacral life force energy. And so you're here to use that. And I find that this is one of those things where it's so interesting the more I talk to people with human design, because I think as a manifestor who doesn't have sacral energy, if someone told me that like I'm here to work and use my energy in this lifetime, I'd be like, oh God, are you kidding me? Like, don't tell me that. But when I say this to generators, they're like, oh yeah, because it's like they have this energy, they want to do something with it. And
Yeah.
they're absolutely not here to like, labor for someone else, although it often happens that way. But it's like they're here to do the stuff that lights them up, that they're excited about. They're here to gain mastery. They want that satisfaction. And so that's really what the generators are here, is to use that life force energy. And the way that they get to that right work is through the sacral and through responding, which is the generator strategy. And so I often talk about the generator strategy as if they're in like a dance with the universe, where I am a little bit jealous of their strategy, to be honest, because I think it's a lot easier to be a generator than it is to be a manifestor. Although, like I said, there's no bad types. But they're kind of in this dance where it's like the universe does, takes a step and then they respond to that. The universe takes a step and they respond to that. So it's almost like if they're really in alignment and using their strategy, I don't want to say there's no risks, but there's just a lot less. Where manifestors, for us, it's kind of like constant risk to a degree. Like we can follow our urges, but we don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know how, like, even if we're following our strategy and our authority, there's not this same kind of, I don't know, smoothness to the experience that there can be for generators. And there's a lot of, different things, profile and whatever, that go into people's life experience. But for generators, it really is this whole thing of like just constantly responding. And it can be so easy of knowing what the right step is, because it's like, okay, did the universe present it to you in some way outside of yourself? Did you respond to it? Perfect. It's kind of like, great, you're on the right track.
Go.
Yeah. And so aside from that, it's just like really doing the stuff that lights them up. And often generators will think like, oh my gosh, I don't want to wait to respond. Like I have all this energy. I don't want to do all this stuff. I don't want to like just sit around. And it's like, well, that's not what you're doing. You're constantly responding to, something you see outside, to something you hear in a book or on a podcast or whatever. Like, it's just anything outside of yourself that you can respond to. So you're never really waiting for long, because you're constantly in this state of response, or this like flow state with generators. And with, what else did I just want to say about that? Thought escaped me. That's okay. I'm sure it'll come back. And so then with manifesting generators, they're very similar. They're still here to respond. They're still here to be in that, flow with the universe. And because they have that manifesting capacity to them as well, it can be really helpful for a manifesting generator to also inform. So once they've responded, then inform the people that are going to be impacted by their actions. And it's what I didn't talk about with manifestors, but this is something that shows up for manifestors as well as manifesting generators, is they also have that quality of like people trying to stop them sometimes. So they sometimes will, and I'm speaking from my lived experience here, become liars to a degree, or like hiders, because they don't want to be stopped. And so it's like, I'm just not going to tell you, and then you can't stop me. And so they kind of become these like sneaky people that are trying to fly under the radar, when really it would just be a lot more helpful and a lot more supportive for themselves as well as everybody in their impact field if they just informed. Because usually manifestors aren't up to like nefarious things, it's just like, I just don't feel like having to explain myself, because as kids we had to, right? We couldn't just be like, okay, I'm going to, this place for the weekend. It's like, no, you're 10, you're not, you're telling me what the heck is going on here, right? And often as adults, we don't make that transition out of understanding that we used to have to ask for permission, and now we get to inform, right? And it helps to clear that pathway. So it's the same thing for manifesting generators. Once they have responded, is to then move forward and to inform people and help them clear that area. And often one of the big differences between, or like the hallmark pieces for a manifesting generator, is that they're generally very multi-passionate. And I think it's quite funny, because when I work with manifesting generators, they're like, yeah, I'm a lawyer and I own a yoga studio, and I also have a hair scrunchie business. And then I do like painting and fishing on the side. And you're like, what? Like,
how do you live?
I have absolutely no idea. But it's so cool with, like, I imagine manifesting generators to have this like expansive energy, where when they're doing stuff that lights them up, it's like their capacity just expands. And it's like they don't need to sleep as much, and their energy, they can just do so much when they're doing the right things. And so what is often kind of detrimental to a manifesting generator is this sort of overall advice that we have in the world of like, focus on one thing, and like, don't spread your energy too thin. But for a manifesting generator, when they're really in alignment with something, the more they do, the more energy they have. And it really is so funny. Like when you meet manifesting generators, just like, especially with the ones that are in alignment, obviously, be like, oh yeah, what else do you do? Like, what are your hobbies? And you're just going to be like, oh my gosh, how do you have the time to do all this? Like, it's magic. I love it. And not to say that other types can't be multi-passionate, but that's just like a major thing that tends to be there for manifesting generators, which is so funny. And I just love it so much. Yeah.
What is like a generator's aura? Are they super open? Are they
Yeah, so
closed?
generators are said to have sort of an open and enveloping aura. And the
Mm,
generator energy, whether they're generators or manifesting generators, the aura is the same, is really this idea of like, it's kind of expansive. It like can get all of the things drawn into it that they need to respond to, but it feels really nice. Like generators, I think usually, and not, again, I'm not saying other people don't have good energy, but generators usually have just like this really nice kind of like warm, glowy energy to be in. And it just like feels really good.
mm,
And so, yeah, all the different types have different auras. And that's where there's kind of this misunderstanding, I think sometimes, or at least the sort of arguments within the human design community have come up around the aura is I refer to manifesting generators as their own type. However, they don't have their own aura. Their aura is the same as a generator because at the end of the day, they're a generator. But I think there's enough difference between, generators and manifesting generators to treat them as their own type because they need to operate differently in a way. And
mhm.
even when it comes to the sacral, with generators, they're taught this idea of sacral sounds of like or generally speaking, something like that, like the guttural sounds, right? And usually generators can resonate with that, but I find a lot of manifesting generators don't. And a lot of manifesting generators can connect to their sacral more through movement, where like a positive sign from their sacral is like a movement towards something, and a no sign from their sacral is like a movement away from something. And so I think, it depends on the chart configuration, but I see that a lot more commonly in manifesting generators. And so it
Mm.
can be helpful for them to understand that, as instead of just being like, trying to hammer in this like thing when they're like, I don't get it, it doesn't work for me.
That's so good. Mm, that's really interesting. You may hate me for asking you this question, but I am like a why chick. So I was going to ask you, why are there no other manifesting projectors, manifesting reflectors? Why is there only a
Yeah.
manifesting generator?
So, because of the mechanics of human design, essentially. So, what makes a manifester, and if this is a little over anyone's head, no worries, but this is helpful to really understand the types, is that what makes a manifester is they have a motor connected to the throat. So, the motors in human design are the emotional solar plexus, the root center, the sacral center, and the heart. And those are the only four motors. Now, if you've been paying attention, manifestors will never have a sacral center defined. So there's three motors that a manifestor can have: the heart, the emotional solar plexus, and the root. One of those will have to be connected to the throat in order for them to be manifestor. Okay, that's what makes a manifestor, a motor to the throat.
Got it.
And it can take a circuitous route. It doesn't need to go directly there, but it needs to be like, you would need to be able to put your like finger on the body graph and trace it to the throat without like lifting it up for like a gate or whatever. So that's what makes a manifestor. And then what makes a generator, like I said, is they have the sacral defined. So generators will always have at least one motor defined because they're always going to have a sacral. And a projector, what defines a projector is kind of a lack of something, actually, is that they don't have a sacral and they don't have a motor connected to the throat. So that's what makes a projector. And then a reflector, they obviously have no centers defined. So there can't be a manifesting reflector. There
Got
can't
it.
be if a projector was going to be a manifesting projector, they would just then be a manifestor.
Yeah.
And the reason there's this hybrid manifesting generator is because you can have the sacral defined, and then you can have a motor connecting to the throat. And so when you have both of those together, you're a generator and you're a manifestor. So you're a manifesting generator.
There you go. Oh, she answered it, people. She answered it. And in a really eloquent way. I was like, oh God, she's going to hate me asking this. But I'm
No,
that
not at
chick that
all.
just is like, why?
Yeah.
No, that's so good. And I was going to ask, for those that are kind of like, I know my brother is a projector, so that's kind of like the only example I have. I'm trying to think. My mom is a manifestor, and I think my
Oh,
dad is a reflector or he's a projector. But if he's a projector, both my brother and then my dad have like a speaking business, like that's what they do, is they speak a lot and they teach a lot. So with their throat not having any connection to a middle center, does that mean that maybe they're kind of rare in that sense, that a projector wouldn't be super talkative like a reflector is, like super talkative? Or is that just unique to them?
yeah. There's so many different things that can go about this, you know, whether they have the throat center defined or not. You know, often you see people that are incredible speakers when they actually have the throat center open, because they can take wherever you have open centers, you take in and you amplify energy. So if you have an open throat center, you can really take in and amplify the energy of the room. So you can kind of be the voice for the room to some degree when you have that open throat. And they might not. I mean, if your dad's a reflector, he definitely does. But if he's a projector, he could still have definition there. So there's just so many different things that can go into using your voice and speaking. And, you know, there's not, I don't really like to look at human design in like limiting ways of like, oh, you can
Yeah.
only be a speaker if you have this and this. No, like there's a lot of different things that go into that. Often speakers and, well, there's certain gates that are associated with like storytelling or teaching, but a lot of people are really incredible at what they do and they don't have those, because whenever you don't have something defined in your chart, you can take that in and you can amplify it. So
Yeah.
it's either like yours consistently or something you're taking in from others and amplifying. Yeah, so there's just
Got it.
so much variation of, like I said, like the nature versus nurture side of it almost.
That's so cool, because that just really helps people kind of feel, I don't know, validated, empowered to be who they are and do what they do. It's just a matter of understanding how you do it, right? Is kind of more of like understanding the way you work, which is
Mhm.
really, like, I think the best part about human design. And there's so much more. We are just like just
Yes.
on the surface of human design, which is really cool. But where can people go to sign up for your program, learn more about human design? I know you have a YouTube channel. Is there anything else that you offer?
Yeah, so I run an online course called HD School that teaches the human design system. If it's not open for enrollment when you come across this episode, it will be at some point, so you can get on the wait list. I teach stuff on Instagram sometimes. Like you said, I have a YouTube channel, and there's books and stuff like that you can find on human design as well. I think it can be really helpful to learn from a variety of people when you're learning human design, because your energy will connect with people differently. And so, people that connect with me are going to learn great from me, and people that connect from someone else are going to learn differently from someone else. And sometimes, especially when you get into more of the details of human design, I find sometimes it'll just be like this one sentence. I find, especially for like the gates, sometimes it's like you're really struggling to understand and it doesn't really make sense. And then someone will say this like one phrase about it, and you're like, oh my gosh, now all of it makes sense. I totally get it. So I think it can be great to just, to learn from lots of people if it's something that you're interested in. But those are the ways that you can work with me. And then I also do have the individual courses for type that I teach my HD school students. I have those for individual purchase as well. If you're
Ooh,
like,
cool.
I'm just a projector, I just want to learn what that is. I have those up on my website if you just want your own type, or like yours and your brother's or whatever.
Oh, that's so cool. And then you also do readings for people as well.
Yes. Yeah, I do.
So cool.
Yeah, they're so fun. I always love diving into people's charts and like, really getting to know people, and then like one-on-one level. It's really cool.
That's really awesome. Well, thank you, Katie, so much for given us the little download, at least on type and strategy. And we talked about words, which was cool. But thank you so much for your time and for sharing with us. This was awesome. We definitely need to have you back to dive into maybe gates and all the other really interesting, very intricate pieces of human design, because this is really cool. And I think it's really important for people to know about, because it's like I said, it's validating, but it also is just reassuring that like for manifestors, go with your gut. Projectors, like, wait for the invitation, be chill. And so it's really cool to understand that more. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.